Olá, pessoal, seja muito bem-vindo a mais um quadro aqui Desbravadores Futebol Clube. E hoje, novamente, está comigo a Yara. E a gente trouxe uma entrevista com a MIA ERIKSSON, que é uma jornalista sueca que vive o mundo do futebol. A gente está muito feliz de trazer essa entrevista para vocês. Mas antes de mostrar, a gente quis trazer uma introdução, falar um pouquinho da MIA para vocês conhecerem um pouco mais dela, para aí sim a gente poder bater esse papo. Bora lá, Yara?
É isso, pessoal. A Mia esteve envolvida desde sempre com comunicação, mas foi durante a Copa do Mundo de 2019 que algo mudou na trajetória dela. Ao ver um tweet de Hedvig Lindahl criticando a forma como a Liga Sueca e os clubes se comunicavam e faziam o marketing da competição, a Mia decidiu agir. Ela entrou em contato com o Linköping, uma equipe sueca, e ofereceu sua ajuda na comunicação e marketing.
Inicialmente, a Mia começou ajudando com lives no Instagram durante as partidas e fotografando os jogos. Sua paixão pela fotografia esportiva a levou a trabalhar pela agência Sports Press Photo. Com poucas fotos disponíveis de futebol feminino naquela época, as jogadoras começaram a entrar em contato com ela pedindo suas imagens, o que criou um vínculo especial entre Mia e muitas delas.
Determinada a aprimorar suas habilidades, Mia fez um curso de análises táticas no Centro de Inovação do Barcelona, a fim de contar histórias mais impactantes sobre as partidas. Ela queria oferecer para as jogadoras uma plataforma onde pudesse falar sobre o futebol feminino de forma profissional, sem se limitar às questões de gênero e equidade.
E aí, em parceria com a sua amiga Amanda Zaza, a Mia criou o podcast Their Pitch, onde elas discutem o futebol feminino de maneira inovadora. Além disso, ela se juntou à Playmaker, uma empresa sueca que utiliza a inteligência artificial para criar estatísticas e análise de futebol, trabalhando com métricas.
E hoje, a Mia também participa de um quadro na Playmaker TV. Ela busca promover uma nova perspectiva e profissionalizar a análise do futebol feminino na mídia. Ao lado de algumas estrelas, Mia é membro da organização Common Goal, para onde doa 1% do que ganha como freelancer. Uma forma de retribuir ao futebol um pouco do que dele recebeu. Abre aspas. Eu me sinto privilegiada fazendo tudo o que eu faço.
Então, pessoal, essa é a Mia e a gente vai conhecer ainda mais sobre ela, entender mais um pouco aí dessa imersão dela no futebol feminino agora na nossa entrevista. Então, continua por aí, já deixa seu like para poder dar essa força e engajamento para o nosso projeto Desbravadores Futebol Clube.
I like your shirt, by the way.
I hope you have fun with us and that's going to be cool for all of us.
I hope I can provide something to this. We'll see. Let's do it.
So now we would like to talk about your opinions. We're going to talk about some views. And let's start with Brazilian football. So our football style and our male players are known to present a very creative, fun to watch game. Most of our footballers are known for their ability and their amusing and entertaining skills. That's how usually the world sees our football, as I mentioned, especially our male players. And we would like to know, what about the women's football? Are they known out there as the same? Like, is Brazilian girls out there known also to be fun, creative, and entertaining?
For us in Scandinavia, 100%. Yes. I do think that what you mentioned about your men's team as well, that's like sets the tone for when one of the European teams, national teams, are going to play Brazil. We expect everything you just said. We expect a very great atmosphere, I think. But also, I think you have players, and this is where I'm going to butcher your Brazilian names. I'm not sure how to pronounce this, but Geise.
Geise from Barcelona.
Yeah. That's. I do think that it's very great to see your players in Europe. I mean, Ludmilla, obviously now, I'm very sad for her because I know I actually watched that game. I saw her torn that ACL, and that's horrible. But I mean, obviously, in that league, in Liga F in Spain, they are seen as one of the greatest talents, and Ludmila is one of the most important players for her club team. So I do think it's quite interesting as well, because many of your players play in good teams and clubs around the world. I mean, obviously, we've seen them play in the Champions League. You have a couple of players in Benfica. You can see it. Great with the ball. And I mean, if you look at some of the European teams, they like to play very straight and direct. And then we have Brazil and Argentina and South American teams overall. I do think it's great that that type of football still exists, and that's kind of a game identity. But it's interesting to see when you speak about game identity and what is Brazilian national team player when your coach Pia takes them out. I mean, obviously you have to have the identity of the game, like it's still a culture, and that's how Barcelona works as well. So I think it's good that we still can see, oh, she's Brazilian without knowing, if you know what I mean.
And I have here like some words from Pia, and it seems like we do have her agreeing with everything you just said. So in one of her first interviews when she became the Brazilian national coach, she said in an interview, quote, "The Brazilian team today, I'm really fascinated about the technique and the ability to find solutions just outside the penalty box. I try to bring the Swedish organization in defending. I realized it would take a little bit longer time to get everybody on the same page, especially when it is defending."
I mean, Pia Sundhage, she was very... Obviously, when she coached our national team, they were pretty much all about defending. Because this is very interesting, because what I do think is that when she were in Sweden, she would have liked to have just a tiny bit of the Brazilian ability to not just defend. And I think she obviously was with Sweden for many years, but we never got there. So I can see where she's coming from with that, because you can't just be all about attack. You have to be able to defend, because that's modern football. So I do think that's very logical and wise of Pia Sundhage to say, and she's obviously a great coach. But I do think that she fits in to your Brazilian culture because she likes to sing and dance, and she's very...
And when it comes to Brazilian players, you have already named a few. Which Brazilian players you think are more interesting to watch nowadays, like from this new generation? Because I really want to focus on new generation, because then you're probably going to say like Marta, and like, no, we know that.
Yeah. She's famous in Sweden, but I get where you're coming from. But I do think also that it's easy to say that it's interesting to watch your attacking players. But also, with that being said, I often find myself, when I watch like Arsenal with, you have two Sousa, one in Real Madrid and one in Arsenal. And then I often find myself thinking that these are the players I watch. Because of the defending, because that's interesting to see how do Brazilian footballers defend. But I mean, obviously you have a great like midfielder. Also, this I'm not sure how to pronounce, but in North Carolina Courage in the NWSL, Caroline. Yeah, I think that's also a great player. So. I mean, obviously you have a very interesting team, and when you look at it, I see a very good mix of youth and experience. I mean, in Brazil, you have both very young players, but also players that have been a part of it for many years, and I do think that that's probably one of the best mix you can get. So I'm very keen on watching Brazil to play the World Cup this summer. But obviously, my favorite player in Brazil is Debinha. You can't you can't take that away. I was so disappointed when she didn't join the WSL in England to play here, so we could see her more.
Next question. in 2019, it was when Brazil announced Pia as our new head coach of the women's national team, and we want to know from you, like your view, if did this move change the way Brazil was seen as a national team, and if it effectively you could notice any change with Pia coming. And as you said, Brazil played Sweden last year. We lost 3-1, but I want to know if something changed.
I think, like I said, Sweden struggled in that game. Obviously, because of what you already been saying about the Brazilian players. They are very fast, can run fast in behind. Our center backs in Sweden are not the fastest. And obviously Pia knows this because she has coached a lot of them. And I do think that Sweden is like the third best team in the world at the moment. And she has been a part of like getting there. So I do think that she's a like legend in Sweden, both as a player and as a coach. I do think that she is very structured, like in a way, without even knowing. But like you said, if you have a very attack, we want to attack, we want to dribble, we want to do this and we want to do that. And obviously, I do think that one of the best parts about watching Brazilian players play is their ability to dribble and actually entertain, because that's a good word. And I do think that when it was announced that she was the new head coach for the Brazilian national team, for me, I remember that my first thought about it was, okay, that's probably a perfect match. But I would also like to say that I do think, not just because of her coaching style or her ability to make players believe that everything is possible, because we could see that when Sweden played in the Olympics and beat Brazil. But that's one of the reasons I think she's a very fantastic coach. But also because I do think that when she steps down as your head coach, she will be one of the biggest reasons that your football federation has taken steps forward to develop the women's game. Probably when you are very technical on the ball and likes to probably play a lot on intuition. I do think that a coach like that could actually work wonder with a squad. So I do think that Brazil should probably be one of the teams to look out for outside Europe in this upcoming World Cup.
So now I'll talk a little bit about Sweden. And we know that Sweden has always been a reference on women's football. And we see like Swedish players playing in the best clubs in Europe. It seems like there is also always a new talented Swedish player coming up. And we wanted to know from you, like, which were like the steps taken in Sweden to get to this point?
I do think that we have a very good player education in Sweden. Like, this is how we play football in Sweden. You get to learn that when you start playing football. You could probably see this also, because this is going to go against the defending organization and structure. But this is also a very cliche thing to say. Like, we play as a team. We don't play with individuals. Everything we do as a team. And you can see that because when our Swedish player go abroad, and then you go into analysis and you watch individual Swedish players in the defending metrics we use in football analysis, you can see that they are very bad because we defend as a team. We don't defend alone, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But that is probably also why the Swedish players are the really good ones, are very attractive for other clubs, because you get that mentality in that we have to do this together. But I do think that the Swedish culture of we play as a team, that's what makes us where we are, also as a national team at the moment. And that's also a reason why our league has been one of the best in the world. And also still is. I mean, we're a small country. In Sweden, we are 10 million people. And I think we have to focus on the fact that we are good at player education. So our unique selling point right now has to be that send your best young talents to Sweden and we'll educate them. And then they will go abroad, play in the biggest leagues, and be what they are because they have been in Sweden and played in our league.
Let's go back a little bit about Sweden as we were talking. So we observe when we look at numbers mainly that in Sweden, the women's football is more internationally prestigious and more in the highlights than the men's football, especially when it comes to the national team. As you even brought it up, like when we look into FIFA's ranking, we see the women's team in third place worldwide, which is awesome. And then when we look into the men's ranking, the FIFA, we see Sweden in 23rd, which is not bad, but it's clearly a huge difference when you compare both of them. Here in Brazil, it's the total opposite. We have a strong men's team. We have won 5 World Cups and so many important titles, while the women's team still haven't won anything worldwide speaking. And here in Brazil, like we know why we have this difference. We're going to talk more about that later, but like we can explain why we have this difference. We have another example like the US, that also the women's team is like Sweden. It's like much more internationally prestigious than the men's team. In the US, we kind of figured that most of men there, when they go to sport, usually they go to American football or basketball or even baseball or hockey. So we were like wondering why in Sweden the women's teams like more prestigious and stuff. Do you have like an answer for that? Like why would that happen?
Well, for the first thing, I think without even knowing, I'm going to say that Sweden are more equal than Brazil.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's perfect because it's not. We have had players in our national team like Nilla Fischer and Caroline Seger, that's our captain at the moment, that have been paving the way for the younger generation that may just have reached the national team. So they have been putting up the fight, which is sad that every women's football player feel the need that they have to fight for equal opportunities and rights. But that's my like answer to that question, because I do know that Sweden is probably the national team in the whole Nordics that have the best resources for their national team, and that is what the ranking is saying as well. So I do think that the opportunity to get really good, if you're a Swedish national team player, have been better than in most teams around Europe. So that's one part of the story. But also, I would like to say that they came from the damallsvenskan, that was the best league in the world when this boom of women's football like came. So they had the opportunity to go to clubs abroad. I do think that generation of the Swedish national team players that play in the national team now, they came from the best league in the world into the clubs where they are at the moment. And that also helped them, if you know what I mean by that. I think it's the reason that we have a good national team now, because of the equality and the opportunities and resources, but also because of the fact that the damallsvenskan was seen as one of the best leagues in the world.
So, like as we were saying before, and I mentioned in the last question, women's football in Brazil is like really behind, and for so many reasons. I don't know if you are aware of that, but in 1940, it came out a law in Brazil that prohibit women's football, and this stayed on for 40 years, and only in 1979, Brazilian football for women became legal again. And only after 3 years, I think it was 1983, that the first national competition actually was like born, created in Brazil. So we had almost 43 years of this late development when it comes to the men's football. So recently, the biggest institutions here are trying to make something about it. One example was in 2019, CBF, which is the Brazilian Football Confederation, they came up with a rule that said that for every male team to play for the first division in the league in Brazil, they were obligated to have a professional women's team and a youth girls team, because most of them didn't have. In 2019, 14 out of the 20 teams in the first league, the first male league, didn't have a women's team. So they put out this rule, and it kind of worked because every team back then created this women's team. Even though they didn't really invest on it, most of them didn't even have like formal contracts with the players. Most of them also didn't pay like a salary to the players. They just created these teams just to make sure they wouldn't be excluded from the national league. But like one side, like positive side of this is most of the clubs still have those teams now, and they're actually developing those teams now. And our question is, like, what do you think about this rule? Like, do you think it's valid? Do you think it's how it's supposed to be? Do you think it's like a positive way to make more people interested in football in Brazil, like women's football? Or do you think it was too harsh and not really effective? What's your opinion?
I think someone needs to like take the lead, obviously, and the decision is a lead. Like this is how we're gonna do it. Obviously, I hope when you take a decision, you have to follow up. Like you have to evaluate things, and like you said, I'm pretty sure that not every club, even if they created and formed a women's team, did it with their heart. Like if you know what I mean by that. But
Yeah.
I do think that someone has to like just step down, set a foot down, and say that, okay, we can't continue doing what we are doing. We need to make something happen. I think people in the business right now, or in football in general, they try what's the best way to do it. You can also see that I think about this a lot in Sweden as well, because we also have men's clubs with women's teams in them. And then they just put an organization behind the women's team that just have worked with the men's football before, and then they think, oh, we're gonna have success just because we're a big club, we have great coaches and yada yada. But then you have to have people that understand the women's game to be successful, even in the organization, like your sporting director, your like analyst or whatever. You need to have people that understand the women's game, because one of the things I think about a lot is the fact that what you said, yeah, is it all good? No, it's not all good to force clubs into it, but it will come out something good from it.
Yeah.
Because more people will open their eyes about women's football. So that's one thing. But just because you have it doesn't make you like successful. And the people, while like the players, if I'm talking about them now, some of them will suffer before it gets better.
Mm-hmm.
Players have to, in one generation, have to take the fight and suffer so it will get better for the generation to come next. Like I said, I'm pretty sure again that these clubs that were forced into having a women's team, they were not all good at it from the beginning. But if 1, 2, 3, 4 clubs really, like when they created the women's team and said that, oh, we're going to do this good, that's a win. But what I do think is that football reflects, and sports in general, it reflects equality in society. So if you have an equal society, like the country you live in, and everything around that is going to reflect on sports and in football.
So yeah, we wanted to ask you, Mia, what do you expect for the World Cup? How do you see also like Brazil? Should we expect being the top 4, like so getting to the semi-finals, or don't you see the Brazilian national team so strong to get to this point?
When we speak about winning mentality, I think that Brazil have to be very disappointed if they don't reach the playoffs, for sure, I would say. I do think that the European teams, the best European teams, they are probably a step further in the quality of football when it comes to tournaments. But also, people have to realize that in a tournament, everything has to click. Every player has to be fit, not get COVID, like we are used to hearing that word at the moment. You need to be able to play the same starting 11 with the twists, the tactical twists and changes you need to be able to beat your opponent. So I do think that, but what I do expect for this World Cup is that it will take the women's game, I mean, the development of the women's game, it will show even more after this World Cup. And I do hope for Brazil that it will reflect on your society in football as well. That you will have a national team that will go there to show your citizens and your fans that they are worth following, and that they are actually professional football players that plays football at the biggest stage you can be at, and that's the World Cup.
We're getting to the end, so we'll start with the quick questions. And
Go for it. I'm ready.
Hope they're all fine. I promise you they are all just fine. Just the first one is a little bit like it's really important question. So, like, you to think wisely before answering. Is it the correct way to say it, football or soccer?
Football.
Okay, let's go to the next question. Do you prefer Sweden to win the Olympics or to get to the World Cup final?
Win the Olympics.
Okay.
Against whom?
Oh man, that's a hard question. USA.
USA.
Okay. What's your favorite team to win the World Cup? You can say Sweden, okay? Just like
I can't say Sweden. Did you say that?
you can't.
I can't say Sweden. Denmark.
Okay.
Or Norway. Fuck it, but that was a hard one. Oh, yeah, Denmark. I will say Denmark. That's my heart speaking.
All right.
Yeah.
Best player you watched live?
Pernille Harder.
Best coach.
Ooh. Best coach. At the moment, Elisabeth Gunnarsdottir, an Icelandic coach in one of the Swedish teams, i Kristianstad. She coached Kristianstad, and she has been there for like 15 years, I think.
Oh, wow.
I like the way she speaks about football.
The most exciting player to watch in Europe right now?
Oh, that's also a hard one. Do you want a youth or one of the just greatest players?
You can choose.
Oh.
We can say both. One of the
Oh, I think it's hard because there are so many in the leagues. But if I'm gonna tell Brazilians on the player I want them to watch, it's Lena Oberdorf in VfL Wolfsburg. They're number 6. I think she's one of the greatest number 6s in the world already, even if she's very young. And she will definitely become one of the world's best defensive midfielders before she quits.
Which team do you think it's the most likely to win the Champions League? The Women's Champions League.
That's also a very, very, very hard question. Because I watched the quarterfinals at the moment right now. I'm gonna say they played scrappy, all of them. If you had asked me this question after the next week, I think I would say Barcelona.
The player you would like to see lifting the Women's Champions League trophy?
That's Pernille Harder.
Yeah. Now let's talk a little bit about the players you have interviewed. Has it ever been one that made you lose your sleep before an interview because you're like so excited for it?
Actually, not yet. I was very nervous before we were about to interview Caroline Graham Hansen in FC Barcelona. I'm not sure why though. So I haven't, I would be nervous if I was about to have Pernille Harder on, because I think for me she is she is the world's best player. Actually, I'm gonna dare to say that.
The biggest football nerd?
Jessie Fleming.
Which one was the funniest?
Ooh. Maybe Andrine Hegerberg, Ada Hegerberg's sister. She was very funny and relaxed, and probably because she's Norwegian. All Norwegian people are very they are so nice. You can hear it's the tone in their accent and voice. They are always so happy and cheery.
The most special interview for you?
That's also a hard one. Yeah, I'm gonna say this. I had when I started writing, I had the opportunity to interview Lina and Lisa Hurtig, who both played for Linköping, and they are married. They have never given an interview as a couple before, but they did to me. I still had it's published on vavel.com in the UK. That was very special because they actually told me before that they had turned every journalist down that had wanted them to. I think they obviously now they have done it, but they hadn't when I interviewed them. So that was very special to me.
The last one, what does football represent to you?
Teamwork, both on and off the pitch. Like, we are all a part of the food chain in football, and we have to do it together, otherwise we won't win in the end.
Let's do the lineup of your top 11. As you said, it's going to be from the Scandinavian countries.
Yeah. Let's do it. So the goalkeeper will be the hardest, since I said that this was going to be a Scandi 11, because I would probably say that right now we don't have any like great goalkeeper in Scandinavia. But I'm going to go with Lene Christensen, who is the Danish national team keeper at the moment, because she's very young, and I like the fact that she has had the opportunity. So go with left back, Sofie Svava, Denmark,
Okay.
Real Madrid. My center backs will be Rikke Seveke in Denmark and Magdalena Eriksson in Sweden. I think they will make a good pair. My right back, this is also, I'm going to go with Maren Mjelde in Norway to get. She doesn't play right back for Norway. She play a defensive midfielder, but she play right back for Chelsea. So let's do that. I'm going to go with the 4-3-3 now. So we get a good number 10 also. So this is my three midfielders. Obviously, I will have Caroline Seger. That's the Swedish national team captain. She's a great number 6. Yeah, and then we have Frida Leonardsen Manum. And then I'm gonna go with Katrine Kyhl, Denmark. Just because she's one of the young and upcoming players here. And probably one of the, she's said to be better than Pernille Harder was at her age, because she's very young. This is a 19-year-old player. So that's my 3 midfielders. And then we have left winger now, Fridolina Rolfö. Number 10, Pernille Harder. And Caroline Graham Hansen as a right winger. If we would have these players on the pitch to play, like mixed Scandi team, I think we would probably be able to win a lot.
Who is your coach?
Who is my coach? This is hard because I want to say I'm gonna take the Linköping coach. He's rumored actually as the new Denmark coach. Oh. He has been an assistant coach in Canada's women's team, and he has been the head coach of Finland's women's national team. And now he coaches Linköping in the Damallsvenskan, and that's André Jäglers. That's my coach.
Great. And he
won the Champions League with Umeå. He was the head coach of Umeå.
Nice. Okay. Last question. Who is your captain?
Who is my captain?
What do you think?
Magdalena Eriksson. I'm going to say that now. Caroline Seger is the Swedish captain, but yeah, if we would play this 11, I would say Magda.
Great.
Thank you again for accepting to talk with us. It was a really nice conversation.